Right, well, I've just spent 25 minutes or so in Stony Stratford High Street looking at the Eleanor mural, having done a story and felt I could wash my hands of her. And just revisiting it in the light of some of the questions you've asked recently, how I feel about it, and the story and the context. Well, it's interesting that since I've been there, nobody walks past. People sort of stop and look and take a picture and talk to their friends about it. And I've been very anxious not to sort of impose my own story on it. And it's interesting what people have come up with. Most people have identified it as Queen Eleanor, although somebody said, was it Boadicea? They weren't quite sure whose queen she was. Somebody wondered whether it was something to do with honouring the dead, because it mentions the dead in the scroll's script on the top. A few people have identified it as having of local significance, i.e. she's her body spent a night in Stony Stratford. But beyond that, there's very little information that people have about it, other than it's quite a romantic story. It's a very strong image in itself. I think the fact that people have seen it being constructed and painted has helped the process of people remembering it. And I think the more I think about it now, the more I feel a responsibility to make sure I've given the correct weight to each elements of the story and the way that I've expressed it. Because it's very clear that one thing it isn't is something for people to just walk past. It has been quite a powerful talking point. People have been seduced by the sheer power of the image itself, even if they're not aware of some of the other things that are going on. They sort of understand the localness, but I think it's a lot to do with Northampton at the moment. The fact that there's a real, they actually have one of the Eleanor crosses, and the public campaign to try and get that repaired. Here in Stony, I think people see it as a nice picture on the wall. Whether that should be corrected by having more specific information on there, I don't know. Eleanor had land in Havisham. She was very acquisitive in building up a large portfolio, and people don't know about that. People also don't know, I think, about the extent to which they were a power couple, and that they were quite extraordinarily different to other medieval monarchs and consorts in that they shared a lot, they were faithful to each other. People just don't know about that, but I think they're just responding very positively to the image there. So there's a role, I think, for the storyteller to go behind the scenes and tell the story. But I'm aware of my responsibility in that people have formed some opinions of her purely based on the powerful iconography of this mural. And that not everybody is really bothered about wanting to know more. That would be quite different, I think, in other countries where there's a more political message behind murals. But stories themselves, yes, it made me aware just how fragile stories are, that one element of what we might think of as important seemed to be unimportant to other people, that somebody could listen to the story and enjoy it purely on the basis of its romantic nature itself, without being too bothered about the historical context in which it's set, and that perhaps at the end there is no clear truth about what this was, and that as it's passed, people are quite happy to accept it or not. It'd be interesting to come back in a year's time whether the wall will then become just part of the furniture of the town, whether it's still such a striking talking point. But it certainly made me aware of my own responsibility in treating a story and the people in it fairly.
My thoughts about the storytelling workshop yesterday evening. It's the following morning and I'm in bed thinking about what was said. We had an exercise in which we each told and listened to a story with a partner and then changed partners and then told the story we just listened to and listened to a new story and then repeated the process. So that eventually we heard our own stories told back to us, but via two other tellings. So that was interesting. It was interesting to see how stories changed and how mine was changed. I think there are several alternate ways I can choose for selecting a story with local relevance to Milton Keynes. I could pick a story secondhand of local interest, an urban myth or other story, or I thought perhaps of choosing an object of local interest. One that I had in mind was the tree in Shenley Wood, which is the boundary tree. I recently was taken on a walking tour around Shenley Wood and Westbury Farm, and there were one or two objects of interest there that could be that had a history and could be the subject of a story. One was the boundary tree on the corner of Shenley Wood. It was an oak which was 450 years old and quite characterful because of its age. And the guide pointed out a face that could be seen in the tree. Quite a rustic, not very pretty face, as if of a witch or wizard or something ancient such as that. And it looked as if somebody had actually tried to deface the tree by removing the face. There was a cut at the side of the face, as if somebody had attacked it with a saw, but had been unable to remove the face. It was just at one side of that part of the tree. And I was thinking perhaps I could research that more and perhaps build a story, create a story around the tree, just make something up. If I couldn't find an actual story about it. Another object at Westbury Farm was a door that was reputed to have been on one of the Armada ships in the 16th century. It was a very old oak door with some which had deteriorated to some extent over time, but was still quite sturdy and strong. It's just a bit of woodworm and some weathering. And perhaps I could build a story around the door there at Westbury Farm. That was interesting because there were some Saxon graves quite local, so the whole area has a long history. There's also the Shenley Toot, which is quite close to me. I've walked around it quite often. I've not actually been on it yet, though. In the field itself, I'll have to put my boots on and take a walk around there sometime. Actually see how close I can get to the mound itself. But I go past it quite often. I go slow picking in the area, actually in the wood between the Toot and the boundary tree, and near Westbury Farm. But I'll have to. I haven't read my pack yet to see what the objectives are, the material that comes with the course. So that's the next thing to do when I'm properly awake.